Very good. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ahmadu wa salli ala Rasul Kareem. We started the chapter on JUMUAH. We gave a brief introduction in our last meeting, some conditions, etc. Like we said, just how to just go through it briefly again. Must be a free person, must be a male, must be a muqim, that means a resident, not a musafir, must be healthy, you must be able to walk, not be crippled, and you must be a person that has eyesight but visually impaired. So that's we learn that Jummah is not wajib on a slave, on a woman, on a traveler, on an ill person, on a crippled person, on a blind person. It's not farz upon them. And then the other shurut relates not to the person itself, but general conditions like it must be a town. You have to do it in Jamaat, you can't do it alone. Then you must have the sultan, it must have in a Muslim country, but we'll discuss this as we go. It comes in the sabak, inshallah, that the sultan must establish it. That in a Muslim country, or you must have his approval, or you must have his deputy there. It must be the time of Zohar, must have a khutbah with it, and it must be azan, right? So, okay, before we start the actual sabak, the first ibarat, we're going to discuss in which place is it permissible to have Jummah. Like I told you, you can't have in any place. And to summarize this, it must be considered to be, like you can say, like in our terminology. Maybe our terminology will not do justice to it, but just to understand, it must be a little city. It can't be a village, so to say. And here, during the Sabbath, inshallah, they'll discuss what is a village and what is a city, right? So we're not looking at the English definition of what is a city, because I think a city in English is different, is much more narrower. I'm looking for the right word in English, but in simple words, you can't read Jummah in every little small place. It must be of a certain size. Certain amenities must be available in that place, right? So, so if it's very small place, like how we say a one horse town, like how we say in English, it's a one horse town. There's no post office. There's no clinic. There's no police station. There's no mayor, etc., etc. Then you can't read Jummah. But if you have the basic amenities, then you can. I'm just giving you an idea, but the details will follow in the Sabbath, inshallah. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلاة الجمعة لا تصح الجمعة إلا في مصر جامع أو في مصلى المصري.
في مصلى المصري.
مصلى المصري.
ولا تجوز. So why does مصلى يصلي مصلي يصلي يصلى مصلى? It's referred إلا you done that in. So see, they say لا تصح الجمعة إلا في مصر جامع. Jumu'ah is not correct except in, take it for the timing, me like this, ratio will come in a big city. Or في مصلى المصري, or in the musalla of the Misr. What musalla refers to here is, musalla normally refers to the Idgah. So even normally the Idgah is out of the city, right? Normally the Idgah is out of the city. It's a little distance out of the city. So even though you are not in the city itself, but those areas which are used are considered to be part of the amenities of the city. You see what I'm saying? That place you can also read Jummah in there. Give you a nice example of this. It was discussed on the ulama chat. That if you look at here in PE, if you look at our airport, it is in PE. It's in the city of PE. So there's no question of Jummah not being permissible because you are in PE. But if you look at Joburg, those who know Joburg, our Tambo, it is outside Kempton Park. It's not in Kempton Park, it's outside Kempton Park. But because it is an amenity of the big city, although it's not in the city, but it is considered to be an amenity of the city. That is why you can read Jummah there. So if somebody asks you, how come you're reading Jummah in OR Tambo, but it's not part of Joburg, Kempton Park, sorry. It's outside Kempton Park. It is outside Kempton Park. So the reason why you can read there is because it is there, here, it's said here. Although the kitab here, but it only speaks about the musalla of the city, is the Idgah, but from the other more detailed kitabs is mentioned any place which is a amenity of the city. Like they give an example also, like in the previous times, you would have outside the city the place where they train the horses for jihad, or they give another example also, the place where they harvest, they dry, the crops and etc. So people gather there also to do that work. So any place which is not the city, but it is an amenity of the city, and it's just outside the city, so you can also read Jummah in there, all right? So two things we learned so far from that text there. One is city must be of a certain size, not any city. The city must be of a certain size. That's the first thing we learned. And then the second thing we learn that even if you're not in the city itself, but you're outside the city, in one of the amenities of the city, you can read Jummah there also, right? Carry on.
لا تجوز في القرية لقوله عليه الصلاة والسلام لا جمعة ولا تشريق ولا تشريق ولا فطر ولا أضحى إلا في مصر جامع.
Yeah. So we're going to give you the definition, inshallah, as we go through sabak, of what exactly constitutes a city in Sharia. Maybe I tell you in English it might be a bit different, but in Sharia it's different. So wala, for the time, just take it to me like this. Wala tajuzu fil qura. And it's not permissible. Yani Jummah is not permissible in a very small village or a very small hamlet. Few people are living there. You can't even get the basic necessities there. You have to travel out of there. If you need a doctor, you need a lawyer, you have to travel outside. Carry on. Like, why? What's our proof to say that the city must meet a certain size? But once again, لقوله عليه السلام, because it's the statement of the Prophet, لا جمعة. There's no Jum'ah. ولا تشريك. Tashriq means what? What does tashriq means? لا جمعة ولا تشريك. تقدير التشريك ولا the Eid of Tashriq, right? Eid al-Adha, right? ولا فطرة. And there's no fitr, Eid al-Fitr. ولا أضحى. And there's no the Eid of Adha, right? Or إلا في مصر جامع, except in a sizable city, right? But I told you we will explain to you exactly here what it means when we say sizable city. So here's the first explanation coming up, right? So you see here from this here, Jummah and Eid, it more or less has the same conditions, right? So the place where you can read Jummah, you can read Eid. The place where you can't read Eid, you can't read Jummah, and vice versa, right? Carry on.
كل موضع له أمير وقاض ينفذ الأحكام.
Right. So in the Islamic context, right, in the Islamic context, what is considered to be a decent city size? Where it is so big, it is so popular that the Muslim government put a mir there, like how we in our context we say we have a mayor, né? Gee? So the tashriq, the Rafu Sauti with the tashriq. So it means like after the days of Eid when you made it takbir and it, right? Gee? Yamut Tashriq. So it's linked to Eid also, same thing, like the Eid al-Adha, right? So in the Islamic context, a big city is that which is so big where the government would put kula mawdi, you'll have an amir. It means like how we say a mayor, a qadi, a judge. The place is very, very small, it won't have its own judge. If there's a case, he'll send him to the nearest big town. But if it's so big that it warrants its own qadi, that shows it's big enough for Jummah, you understood? ينفذ الأحكام. You have such a qadi that he implements the laws of Sharia. ويقيم الحدود, and he established the hudud. If somebody stole, he will cut his hands. Somebody committed zina, he will be lashed, etc., etc. somebody consumes alcohol, he will be lashed, etc., etc. So this right. So this is the opinion of Wahada and Abu Yusuf. This is the opinion of Imam Yusuf. So now in our context, obviously, we not living in a Muslim country, so we won't look for an Amir or Qazi. We look at, like I told you, ulama explained the basic amenities are found in there. Like there's a police station there. If it's big enough, there's a police station in there. See? I got your Wahada in the Abu Yusuf. What you got? Okay. So that is right. So you say this is the opinion of Imam Hanifa and Abu Yusuf. And so I'll say in our context, we don't have a Muslim country, so there won't be a Qadi, there won't be a Amir. So we look at like a police station, a mayor, post office, a clinic, etc., etc., right? So Wahada and Abu Yusuf, in my copy, in your copy, which is Wahada and Abu Yusuf, Abu Hanifa, Wa'anhu, also from Imam Yusuf is narrated. This is one opinion. Another opinion is this here. إذا اجتمعوا في أكبر مسجدهم لم يسعهم. If there's so many people living in that, now obviously we're speaking about a Muslim place, right? Like a Muslim a village or a Muslim city, that it is so big that if all the men try together in the masjid, but the masjid is not big enough to accommodate them. The masjid is not big enough to accommodate them. Then, when they reach that number, now you'll say that you can reach Jumu'ah in such a place. You understood that? You understood that? So, والمثل الجامع the مثل الجامع كل موضع in every place. Sorry, وعنه and also narrated Atar of Yusuf. So I'm not sure if that وعنه is also from Abu Yusuf and Imam Hanifa only. So that's the وعنه only from Imam Yusuf according to this copy. إذا اجتمعوا when they gather في أكبر مساجد in the biggest masjid لم يسعهم. Right? It will not be big enough to accommodate them. There's so many people, right? So now they're saying والأول refer to this one here. والمثل الجامع قول موضع له أمير قاضي ينفذ الأحكام ويقيم الحدود. والأول اختيار الكرخي. The latter ulama Imam Karhi was heavyweight. He chose this opinion. وهو الظاهر. He gave fatwa on this first opinion here. You understood that? And وهو الظاهر. This is one of the words that show that the fatwa is on this, right? Wasani, and the second one, which is this here, is that there must be so much people living in the town that when all the men gather in the masjid cannot accommodate them. This is the opinion of Wasani Ikhtiyar, right? This is the opinion of Salji. But as I said, here saying more Zahir, that means this is the more preferred opinion. One of the Zahir refer to those that means like the fatwa is given, on the opinion of Imam Karhi, not Imam Salji. Understood that? Right. Then he's saying, وَالْحُكْمُ غَيْرُ مَقْصُورٍ الْمُصَلَّى. That's what I explained to you earlier. Like what he's saying is, explaining now the ibarat of لا تصح الجملة إلا في مثل واحد القدوري ibarat or jami series ibarat. What you say, you know? What ibarat is it? Quduri. So Sai Bidayat is explaining, he's saying, what he's saying next ibarat, that although Imam Quduri mentioned only musalla, but it doesn't mean only the musalla. Musalla means idgah. I explained to you, any amenity in which the Jummah, any amenity of the city, like I told you, the examples are given in the kitab of where they leave the crops to dry, or the way they train the horses, like the military barracks, etc., etc. So this is what Saib is saying. وَالْحُكْمُ غَيْرُ مَقْصُورٍ عَلَى الْمُصَلَّى. The law is not restricted to the musalla, the idgah only. بل يجوز في جميع أفنية المصري. But it is permissible in all of Afniya, literally translates as the courtyard. But in this context, it doesn't mean courtyard. It means any, like I told you, any amenity out of the town, like how I told you, like if you look at the airport, our Tambu, it is an amenity of what? Of Kempton Park, right? So anything. And here they give the reasoning. What's the reasoning? لأنه بمنزلته في حوائج أهله. That the afniya, the amenities, it is like part of the town. Even though it is not physically part of the town, it's slightly out of the town, but it will be considered to be part of the town. Because the afniya بمنزلته, it is in the same hukam of the what of the town. Why? في حوائج أهله, with regards to the needs of the people, because this services the needs of the people. So any place outside the town, like if you got, for example, I said in the town, a big hospital, for example, and it's just outside the town, then you can even read Jummah there, even though it's outside of the town. Because the hawaiij, the needs of the people, are serviced from there. So from what I remember, the fatwa with regards to is on this call here, that if the town has the basic amenities, like I said there, there's a qazi and amir, etc., then it qualifies for what? It qualifies for Jummah. But the next Ibadah is quite interesting. If you look at Mina, I don't know if you went for Ziyarah to Mina when you went to Jummah. Now, back in the day, Mina was not populated. It will only be populated in the time of Hajj. Out of Hajj, there was no one there. Out of Hajj, there was no one there. So the question comes about, can you read in the time of Hajj? Can the Hujjaj perform the Jummah day, or can they not perform the Jummah day? Can the Hujjaj perform the Jummah in Mina or not? So, is it a city, or is it a village, or is it the Fina, like we told you, and amenity of Makkah, so you can read it, etc., etc.? That is the next discussion. Let's read it. Bismillah.
بل تجوز في جميع أفنية المصر لأنها بمنزلة في حوائج أهله، ويجوز بمنن إن كان الأمير أمير الحجاز وكان الخليفة مسافرا عند أبي حنيفة وأبي يوسف رحمه الله. فقال محمد رحمه الله: لا جمعة بمنن لأنها من القرية حتى لا يعيد بها، ولهما أنها تتمصر في أيام الموسم.
Okay, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويجوز بمنن. You got a tanween on there, right? Because it's only two letters, right? بمنن إن كان الأمير أمير الحاج. It will be permissible in Mina if the Amir is the Amir al-Hajj. So there's two things we're discussing as Masla. Remember, if you go back, we told you, typically in a Muslim country, you must have the Khalifa that is there, or his deputy to establish the Jummah. In our context, obviously, we don't have an Amir. We don't have a Khalifa, right? We don't have an Amir. We don't have a Khalifa. So that is why you say, but how come we established Jummah here? One person got to open a Musalla here, you open a Masjid here, he has Jummah there. So that you do in the fatwa books, we'll discuss that at a later stage. But for the time, we just consider this to be a Muslim country. Obviously, Saudi is a Muslim country. In the back in the day, it was Muslim. So they say, even though it's a small place, but if the Amir, now two things, okay, before we go. One is you have the Amir, which is the Khalifa of the Muslims, right? He's the Amir al-Mu'mineen. And one is you get the Amir of Hajj. Like, I'll give you an example. In the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, after Makkah was conquered, the first year Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam never got himself for Hajj. He never got himself for Hajj. But he sent as Abu Bakr, he mentions Abu Bakr, the Amir of Hajj. Nah? You know that, right? So they say here, ويجوز بمنن إن كان أمير الحجازي. Right? If the Amir of Hajj is the Amir of Hijaz, that area, like you can say, like Mayor is a person in charge of one city, and if a person is in charge of a whole province, is called, like in our context, is called the Premier, isn't it? So if the Premier or the Amir of Hijaz he is also at the same time the Amir of Hajj. Then they can make Jumu'ah in Mina. Why? Because the condition of the Amir being there, or his deputy being there, or having given permission is found. And according to this, so that was a separate issue. The other issue is they say here also Mina will fulfill the criterion of being a place of Hajj. So there's two things there understood. One is according to this text, Mina, because we said earlier, it must be a decent sized city, or it must be the final of a city, right? Yeah? Which is the courtyard of the city or the outer parameters where there's some amenity. So once the Amir of Hajj is there, it means you've got the permission of the Amir, and it fits the condition of being a city, right? أو كان الخليفة مسافرا, or even the Khalifa of the whole Muslim world is there and he's a musafir, no problem. Even though he's a musafir, he can still perform the Jumu'ah. He can still, with his permission, Jumu'ah can still be done there. In the Abi Hanifata, according to Abu Hanifa, wa Abi Yusuf rahimahullah ta'ala, according to Imam Yusuf rahimahullah ta'ala. وقال, right, so according to Muhammad, Imam Yusuf, you can make it Mina. وقال محمد لا جمعة بمنا. According to Imam Muhammad, he said you can't read Jumu'ah in Mina. I carry on.
قال محمد رحمه الله لا جمعة بمنى لأنها من القرية حتى لا يعيد
من القرى
حتى لا يعيد
بها. So that Imam Muhammad said, look here, Mina, like we discussed earlier, it must be a small city. And Mina is not a city. And what's our proof to say it's not a city? Do you read Jumu'ah namaz? I mean, do you read Eid namaz there? They don't read Eid namaz there. So he's saying the fact that they don't read Eid namaz in there shows you what? It is not it's not a city. It doesn't meet the criterion. So the fact that we don't read Eid namaz there, we can't read Eid namaz there, shows you it is not a small city. So it's not a small city, you can't read Jumu'ah there. You understood that? So this is now Imam Muhammad's call. Carry on.
ولهما أنها تتمثل في أيام الموسم وعدم التعييد للتخفيف.
So they say, look here, so this was Imam Muhammad, Imam Shaykhain, Imam Abu Hanifa, and Imam Yusuf. They say, look here, we agree with you that maybe it's not a city, but Hajj time, the place gets full. It is even bigger than, there's more people than a small city there. It's even, if you go now, even, I mean, nowadays there's so much, there's millions, like 1 million people, 2 people, 1 million, sometimes 1.5 million, sometimes 2 million people. That's bigger than a small city. So it is like a temporary city. You understood? They say, وَلَهُمَا, they say, أَنَّهَا تَتَمَصَّرُ فِي أَيَّامِ الْمَوْسَمِ. It becomes like a city فِي أَيَّامِ الْمَوْسَمِ, in the days of Hajj. Right? And then they answer the reasoning of what you call it, of Imam Yusuf. They said, we don't read Eid, so that means not a city. They say, وَعَدَمُ التَّعْيِيدِ لِلتَّخْفِيفِ. The reason why we don't read Jumu'ah Day is because, I mean, Eid namaz, because it will be too difficult. You've got so many millions of people, especially in today's day and age, and now you must, and they're busy with the rites of Hajj, and now you must tell them so to make Jumu'ah Day. It's too difficult, so we don't read Eid, or Eid is not left out because it's not a city, but rather Eid is left out. Why? Because of the difficulty. You know that this Messiah, al-haraju madfu'un, that the principle you done, the difficulty is always left out, right? Right. Then the next verse, وَلَا جُمُعَةَ بِعَرَفَاتِ فِي قَوْلٍ جَمِيعًا. So there's no ikhtilaf here between between the 3 Imams. Also in Jumu'ah, in Arafah, there's no Jumu'ah. So like if it happens that your day of Arafah is on the day of Jumu'ah, they will not reach Jumu'ah. Why? Because لأنها في ضائب. That is no doubt that this is an empty place, and there's no buildings. Mina still had some buildings. وبناء وبمنا أبنية, and Mina is some buildings, right? So there is no ikhtilaf, there's no Jumu'ah. So here this ikhtilaf, if I remember correctly, I must just see the fatwas on who's called, I'm not sure who's called the fatwa is. It appears that is anything there in your kitab on fatwa that was called that you say? Do they read Jumu'ah in Mina nowadays? I don't know. Everybody knows I can't. Let's check it up. But anyway, you've got the doctors of opinion there in the Hanafi Mazhab. والتقييد بالخليفة وأمير الحجاز لأن الولاية لهما. So I explained this to you. Why we say that either the Khalifa must be there, والتقييد بالخليفة وأمير الحجاز, or the premier, so to say, of Hijaz province must be there. Why? لأن الولاية لهما, because they are in charge. They are the ones who have what? They are the ones who have control of these areas. They've been appointed by the Khalifa, and they are the only ones who can establish Jummah. Remember, this is now in the Islamic country context. Amma Amirul Mausami, as for the person who's just the Amir of the season, like I told you, Abu Bakr was appointed Amir of Hajj, right? فَيَلِي الْأُمُورَ الْحَجِّ. He's only in charge of Hajj. He's not the general Amir. And it's only the general Amir who has got the right to establish the Jummah, right? لا غير. Nobody else has that, right? وَلَا يَجُوزِ إِقَامَةُ إِلَّا لِسُلْطَانٍ. So that's why I tell you, the Amir, the Sultan, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, وَلَا يَجُوزُ إِقَامَةُ. Nobody can establish Jummah إِلَّا لِلسُلطان, the Sultan. أو لمن أمره السلطان, or who the Sultan appoints him. Why? And they give the reason, لأنه تقام بجمع عظيم. That normally Jummah is a lot of people, right? وقد تقع المنازعة في التقدم والتقديم. Now people argue, you must be the, I want to be the Imam. Sometimes maybe they won't even argue with regards to taqaddum and taqdeem, who must be imam, who must be in front, etc. There'll be fights with regards to other things. You speaking too long, you speak too short, like how people. So وقد تقع في غير يعني تقع المنازعة في غيره فلا بد منه يعلم لا بد من الأمير أو نائبه تتميما. Buildings. That is one of the reasons why they say it's permissible. So if there's people living there now permanently in Mina, then there's no question that it will be permissible then, based on the fact that it is a small independent city on its own.